Project.
I'm Grace Jacobs.
I'm Ellie Cooper.
And I'm Reagan Newman, and our topic is abortion.
So before we begin, we wanted to define a few of the terms that we'll be using throughout our panel. We're defining pregnant as containing a developing embryo, fetus, or unborn offspring within the body. An embryo is a developing human individual from the time of implantation to the end of the 8th week after conception. A fetus is a developing human from usually 2 months after conception to birth, and conception itself is the process of becoming pregnant involving fertilization or implantation. For questions.
Ooh. You got that written down, don't you? I may need to borrow that later.
Ladies, can you just begin by defining abortion for us for the purposes of this panel?
Abortion, as for the purpose of this panel, is the intentional ending of a pregnancy, also referred to as termination of a pregnancy.
And did you just define pregnancy?
Yes. Containing a developing embryo, fetus, or unborn offspring.
Anytime that process is stopped, it's abortion.
Yes.
Because they go overboard.
Purposely medically stopped.
What did you learn about the various abortion procedures that are available and the risks involved in this?
So, for the different types of abortions that are available, like within different programs or institutions, within the first trimester, there are 4 different kinds that can happen. There's methotrexate and misoprostol. I don't know how to say it. Prostol. Yeah, misoprostol. And it is a medical abortion that is performed within the first 7 weeks of a pregnancy. And it's an oral medication that is taken that expels the contents of the uterus, which it would resemble a miscarriage. There's also mifepristone and misoprostol, and it is only also used in the first semester or first trimester, but is used within the first 7 to 9 weeks, and it's just a different kind of drug. There's also manual vacuum aspiration, which is also referred to as an NVA, and that is used from weeks 3 to 12. And in that case, a doctor would use a local anesthetic and would enter the cervix using a suction tool to remove the contents of the uterus. And then the final one for the first trimester is aspiration, and that's a surgical procedure that can be done up to 16 weeks, and it's also referred to as a D&C. Within the second trimester, they use D&C, like I just said, which is used up to 16 weeks of gestation, and they use like a vacuum to remove the contents. And then there's dilation and evacuation, which is used after 16 weeks. In that case, a doctor would go in and use forceps to pull out the pieces of the baby, and then at the end, after accommodating for all the pieces and making sure all of them there, they would go in, crush the skull with the forceps, make sure that the skull is crushed, pull out the remaining pieces, and then use a vacuum to scrape the lining of the uterus. The final kind that is usually very rare and would be used in a 3rd trimester abortion or a very late 2nd trimester would be an induction abortion, which is where the woman has Pitocin injected into her veins to induce labor, and then they would enter salt water, urea, or a potassium chloride into the amniotic sac, which would stop the baby's heartbeat.
So from a colloquial standpoint, would that be referred to as a partial birth abortion?
Yes.
And then in terms of the first 2 that you mentioned, would those be considered part of the morning after pill?
No. The morning after pill stops fertilization before it begins. So the morning after pill only works within 72 hours after having sexual intercourse, and so it prevents implantation.
So that then really is not abortion.
No.
The goal of the morning after pill is
Right.
to do that. Now, sometimes if it's taken later or if there are other effects, so there are instances where that would be classified as an abortion.
So people are using it that way even if it wasn't designed that way?
They're not using it for abortions, but it could result in
Oh,
abortion.
I see.
What did you see about risks related with those procedures for the woman?
So within like the medical, like taking a pill, risk-wise, there isn't a whole lot there for the woman, other than just like heavy bleeding that might cause issues. But when it comes to like the manual vacuum aspirations and the D&Es, that leaves a lot of scar tissue in the uterus, which can cause difficulties in later pregnancies. It can cause difficulties getting pregnant. And psychologically, getting an abortion, there's been, I think you covered a lot of that on what the, there's a lot of things that can go wrong psychologically in a woman after having one. It can even affect them being able to get pregnant in the future, not even like in their health, but just psychologically, it cuts the ties between a mother and an infant.
And according to a statistic I found, it said that illegal abortions are unsafe and they account for 13% of all deaths of women because of serious complications that happen because the person was not trained enough to safely complete the abortion.
Did you say 13?
Yeah, 13%.
Going back to the effects besides the psychological, which I think Ray can touch on in a second, I focused my research more on the effects of like birth control leading up to. So the depot shot, which is an injection that the woman takes every 3 months for pro-testing, and that prevents the ovulation, which therefore would prevent fertilization of the egg. So the effects are temporary bone thinning, changed periods, nausea, weight gain, headaches, breast tenderness, depression, bruising, or even skin indentation where that medication is given.
So this not only has a psychological impact on the woman, this also has a greater impact on society as well. So in a study in Canada, they found that abortion decreases an individual's instinctual restraint against the occasional rage felt towards those dependent on his or her care. This also allows like a permission to diminish the taboo against aggressing against the defenseless. And this cuts, as Ellie said, the developing mother-infant bond, thereby diminishing her future mothering capability. So if a woman has already performed one abortion later in life, that bond between her and her child diminishes. This also increases guilt and self-hatred, which is oftentimes taken out on the child. And it increases hostile frustration, intensifying the battle of the sexes, which children are often scapegoated.
I know if you look at the statistics on postpartum depression, so a woman gets pregnant, she has her child, she goes through postpartum depression. The suicide rates for having a baby and going through postpartum depression are exponentially lower than the postpartum depression rates after somebody has an abortion. I don't have the exact numbers on here, but I know that there's a huge difference in the depression rates there, as if somebody would just go through the pregnancy, give their child up for adoption, and then happen to go through postpartum depression. The depression rates and the suicide rates are way lower.
Can I go back? Actually, you mentioned that 13% figure in terms of the illegal abortions. Is that complications coming from illegal?
Yes, it's
Yes.
complications
Deaths.
because like they ended up like leaving something in there or like the tools they used weren't sanitary
Yeah.
and so it led to like infections which spread
Right.
and caused.
So do you have any data that indicate how that number has changed? Like what was that 100 years ago, for example?
I couldn't find where it said that it was like 100 years ago, but it does say like it was like 13% of them are because of like illegal abortion complications.
Current.
Yes, correct.
So what about even over the last, 40 years since Roe v. Wade? Do we have any data that says that there are, more deaths from illegal abortions now than there used to be, or vice versa?
I couldn't really find it, but it does say that more than 40% of all women will end a pregnancy by abortion at some time in their reproductive lives. Which I think most of them are legal abortions, and then some of them, like 13% that are done are because they've gone to illegal abortions.
Do you have any information on what percentage of abortions are illegal?
It said it says 10 to 20 million abortions are performed illegally. Yes, and then 20 to 30 million are illegal.
Obviously, it's harder because of those numbers,
No, it's-
because legal abortions aren't reported. We have seen different trends depending on kind of the influx of
Well, if we're looking at like states across the United States, there's actually only 8 states in the United States that don't require a licensed physician to perform one. So out of all 52 states, there's only 8 that you could go to an unlicensed physician.
Did we increase our number of states?
What'd I say?
Different class.
Oh.
Sorry. You
There's
threw
only-
me a softball, I had to swing it that one, Alex.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's only 8 that don't require a licensed physician, and most of them also have to be performed at a hospital. Statistic-wise on like how many there are, so if you're comparing it to like the birth rate, the abortion rate in the U.S. within the last year was 11.8 abortions per every 1,000 women, and the birth rate was 52.7 births for every 1,000 women. So our birth rate is essentially higher than our abortion rate.
But that also says 5 out of 6 pregnancies result in actual delivery, the one will
Yeah.
result in an abortion.
So if we're looking at statistics as on like the reasons why someone would have an abortion, 40% is financial, 36% is like timing, 31% is partner related, 29% need to focus on other children, 64% is multiple reasons for seeking an abortion crossing over several different themes, and then less than 1% is rape or sexual abuse.
Ellie brought up something that I thought was really interesting. So right now our birth rate is higher than our abortion rate. Are there, in comparison to maybe some other countries, that abortion is more legal or something like that? Are there other countries where the opposite is true?
We mainly focus on the United States, but I did come across a couple of charts that just happen to have other countries on it, and I know ours is actually higher than a lot of places like Sweden or Norway.
Our birth rate,
Our
or
abortion
our
rate.
abortion rate.
It's not legal, yeah, it's 8% higher in places in Europe, mostly because it's just not accessible, and I don't think it's as much of a issue there. I think people highly consider our foster care system to be a problem, and there that's not as much of an issue. So people like finding reasons for an abortion are less likely there.
Can you talk to us about laws in Kentucky concerning abortion and maybe other states?
So I can give you the exact number of the law, but that's a really long number. But there's about 120 sections where that summarized mean that after the unborn child is viable past the first trimester, so that in the next 2 trimesters you can't have an abortion once the child is viable, unless it's an endangerment to the health of the mother. Obviously, New York just passed the 3rd trimester abortion.
Yeah. I know Kentucky itself has restricted it as much as they possibly can. There has to be one place legally, based on like the United States, there has to be one place in a state that you can have an abortion. Kentucky only has one place.
That's a federal law, but there must be
There must be one place in every state, at least one.
Where is that? Kentucky?
Not exactly, I think it's up in northern Kentucky somewhere, I'm not sure exactly
Is it
where.
Louisville? I think it's Louisville,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there has to be one place. If you're looking at other states, I don't have a ton of like statistics on how many other states have, but I know Kentucky is one of the most restricted.
On that note, how hard did you find it to find research and data that you felt like you could trust and wasn't clearly biased by one side of this debate or the other?
Statistic-wise, it was kind of like easy to find like statistics on why and how and the reasons and that kind of stuff, but finding other like research on like Planned Parenthood or the like views on it and that kind of stuff, and having more insight on that, it was really hard to find anything that was in the middle.
Personally, the 2 primary sources of data, like she was saying, numerical data that we found were from the CDC and the they were still they weren't leaning one way or the other. But once you started getting into the reasons why and then people's commentary, that can get very one-sided.
I know that with my research, I focused more on morality versus immorality, and I found that a lot of my data was more progressive and that it favored pro-choice.
When I was like doing research, it was like I would find something and then like for like what type of deaths to abortions, it would be like 13%, and then I would try to go to find another place and it would be like, oh, like you shouldn't get an abortion, leave all these deaths, and like it's kind of like one-sided, very biased.
I have a question, just because I don't know that the truth ever gets presented exactly right. Have abortions increased in the United States since Roe v. Wade in 1973? Many people would say, yes, the floodgates were open, we've got a whole lot more abortions, here's the numbers. Others say, no, the same number of abortions are happening, it's just now they're being done legally, they're being done illegally. Do you have any data or research that would answer that?
The statistics that they actually fluctuated up and down within, the last, whenever, I don't know when Roe versus Wade was exactly.
73.
Yeah, so since the statistics that I looked at were from 1980 to now, and they were very up and down all over the place. Right now we're actually at a low point currently. As of 2018, we're in a lower section of how many were being performed. If you looked back a few years in like 2014, 2015, they're much higher.
The CDC performed a test or a survey from 2006 to 2015, and that was the most recent publication that they had on abortion statistics on their website. But it definitely, like she said, fluctuated. You usually saw if there was an abortion law, then it just become, easier to get an abortion. You saw an increase, but then, slowly that declined. Or if you saw new laws implemented or that made it harder to get an abortion, you saw abortion numbers decline. But also, like she said, we're at an all-time low.
Are there any laws surrounding, let's say I'm pregnant and want an abortion and I can't get it? Are there any laws surrounding my ability to travel to another state?
I did not find it.
Yeah, I didn't find anything. I would assume, unless there was a specific ban put on it, that you would be able to. That's what I would assume. I didn't find anything saying you couldn't.
Completely unrelated question. So you said here in Kentucky that it's legal up to the first trimester, correct? Can you talk to us about the development of, you said the term embryo at that point, first trimester, is that correct?
So an embryo is from up to the first week.
Good first 8 weeks, okay.
Yeah.
Regardless of that age, I would say. So can you talk about the development?
So, if you're looking at the first trimester, first 3 months, by the second month in itself, so by week 6, the heartbeat can be detected. So at that point, it has a living heartbeat, there's blood being pumped through its body, and after week 8, they're no longer scientifically an embryo. So if you went to a doctor, they would refer to it as a fetus. The 3rd month, right before your 2nd trimester, the baby has arms, legs, toes, fingers, hands, and they're all fully formed. It can close its mouth, it can form a fist, the reproductive organs are being formed, and the circulatory urinary systems are working, as well as the liver produces bile. And then your 2nd trimester starts by the 1st month in your 2nd trimester, month 4. They have eyelids